Maboika ituno kina ate auno. What's going on? Well, I am. So let me go on as we already had. Let me drink a little bit of this. First, let me start off by saying I made me smoothie. This is papaya and pineapple smoothies that I made. What I do is I boil eucalyptic with my bladderwrack and my soursop, my guanabana leaves. I boil that, then I strain that, and I take the water that I strained, and then I put it in a blender with papaya, pineapple, and a little bit of banana in there. I'll try to sweeten it up, and then put some ginger and some cinnamon, and awesome, very good. Throughout the day, I try to drink a smoothie like that, you know, so as to get all those nutrients in and stuff like that. Anyway, it's interesting. So we spoke about the star energy center and a connection to the source, and which is the sun. Now, what I also meant to say, you got 7 of those energy centers that are in your body. Well, actually, 6 of them that are actually in the body. You know what I'm saying? Superimposed by certain organs. But then you have the crown is above your body, very closely knit to your body, and then you got the star energy center, which is the sun, outside of your body, the sun. And then you have the earth energy center is below your feet. So I just wanted to put that out there. You know what I'm saying? So when we deal with the energy behind that particular star, we're dealing the energy behind the sun. You know what I'm saying? And how that energy affects us and the source. Um, just want to go quickly into something here. Just real quickly, you know, mention some of the stuff that forgot to mention about the Star Energy Center, which is very interesting here. And let me see. I got a lot of notes on my iPad. I'll make sure that I keep these notes in here. And let me see. Where are you? Where are you? Where are you? Hmm. Did I miss something here? I'm looking for where electricity. Oh, here it goes. So when it comes to dealing with the sun, where the star energy center, that sun, we're looking at electricity in nature, electromagnetic forces that come from the sun and how that help power nature. So there are natural occurrence of electricity. One of them that we know is the electricity, um, that is not only found in power lines and electronics that are man-made, but it also could be found in nature. In fact, electricity is all around us, all around us. We see that in lightning storms. Animals use it to defend themselves and to stun, even kill their prey with it. Even our own body uses electricity to send messages to our muscles and also to get our heart pulsating and also our brain, our neurons. Well, let me just read real quickly about lightning. One of the most fantastic display of electricity in nature is lightning. Lightning occurs when large amount of static energy builds up in the clouds from the energy of storms. When electricity charge or regions of cloud are discharged in their energy, a large flash of electricity can be seen in the sky. Lightning may occur from cloud to cloud, or it can occur from cloud to the ground. Lightning strikes carry a huge amount of energy. A typical lightning strike carries an electrical current of over 30,000 amps and delivers 500 megajoules of energy. Lightning also creates loud noises called thunder. This is because the air within the lightning gets so hot that it transforms into plasma for a short period of time. And when the molecules of air turn from gas to plasma, there's an expansion the expansion causes a shock wave that we hear as thunder. Okay. Now, animals, you know, some animals use electricity to survive in nature. Many of these animals are found in the ocean where some use electricity to detect objects around them, sort of like seeing, and others use electricity to fend off predators and even hunt for food. Probably the most common animal of electrical capacities is the stingray. Uh, there are 14 known species of stingray that range in habitat from the Pacific coast to California to the British Columbia, all the way to various Atlantic locations. Other fish belonging to the order include the coffin rays, the sleeper rays, the numb fishes, and all of the and all with electric capacities. The order totals over 60 creatures in the ocean. Now, the electric animal hangs suspended in water, lies burnt in the sand, waiting for the prey of a fish to come within its range. When a unsuspecting fish comes by, the ray lunges forward in a quick motion and wraps the prey in the fold of its pectoral fin. It will kick with its tail and roll completely in order to tighten its grip, and while delivering electric shocks to its victim. The maximum voltage during the initial attack is like 45 volts. A ray will issue over 400 rapid pulses of direct current, about 5 milliseconds long each, during a violent attack, some delivering as many as 300 pulses in a single second. The temperature of the water affects the speed of the pulse. The warmer the water, the faster the attack, and the power of some rays have been measured as a full kilowatt. Outside of hunting, rays are thought to be used as special organ called a ampullae of Lorenzini to pick up electrical cues from possible prey fish when the visibility is low. Right? Now let's go into the human body. Okay, because remember, this is connecting to source, and this is knowing about how the sun power our bodies in many different forms. Not only can we see electricity work in nature, we're also constantly using electricity in our bodies. Every time we move a muscle, every time you move a muscle, right? Even your vocals have muscles. Every time you move the muscles, it results in an electrical signal being sent from our brain to our muscles, telling them to move. Got that? We actually have a complex system of nerve throughout our body that uses electrical signals to control everything we do. Everything. The nerve signal jumps between nerve cells as a synapse. That's what they call synapse. When the nerve signal jumps from one nerve to another. This is true for other animals and birds too. In our heart is a special center which governs the rate and rhythm of the heart and the flow of blood around our body. It is our own natural pacemaker generating electrical signals which can speed up, for example, if we need to take flight or we need to fight. And because electrical signals are fast, they allow us to reach quickly to the situation. They allow us to reach quickly to a situation for our own survival. All messages passing through the body to the brain are electrical impulses in which our bodies rely to stay alive. So, putting your awareness to this part of the mind that deals with this sun energy, this star energy. We're dealing with electricity. Okay, we're being aware of this electricity. That's why, for instance, Bruce Lee used to use electrical shock to shock his body so that he could create his speediness, accuracy, and his muscles to react under these electrical currents. You can look that up. You know what I'm saying? So when we eat sun food or electrified food, that is what we're transferring that energy from the sun, which is being transferred into our body also. Okay. And it creates our system. Remember when we spoke about putting our system online? We have a digestive system, we have a nervous system, we have immune system. All these systems go online when you take in the right type of sun. When you take in some sun food, you put the system, it charges up your body so that these electrical currents, right, are able to power up the body and power up those systems and go online. It's all connected. You know what I'm saying? And when that system goes online, it affects also all your energy centers because all your organs are part of a system and those electrical currents, right? And then all of that is being powered by these energy centers where they're like plexus of electromagnetic forces of plexus within our bodies. And we have thousands of them, thousands of them. But we're dealing with these main ones. Right now, we're speaking about the star. Okay. Now, I want to even go further up there because, you know, you got the star energy center, but then you also have the multiverse center, the constellation of how all those stars form a constellation and how that affects our character personality, which is our spirit, you know, our attitudes and the way we navigate through nature. So it's important to know. And so in this podcast, I just want to have a conversation with you. And we want to take it back. And let's see. Let's go back. So, um, so I wanted to speak about the constellations and what's happening now. So we're going to start off with how, you know what, let's go back 100 years and see how all of that affected us now. Let's do that. I think that's even better. So what we're going to do, let me see, is we are going to go back into what we call the how we were affected by the, let me see. I got it somewhere around here. This is just recently I did. So we're going back. Oh, you know what? And I'll do it like this. So I got notes all over the place, man. Notes all over the place. Um, tag that. Um, tag that. Go back here. So let's go back 100 years. So we're in 2020. Let's go back to the 1920 and what happened in the 1920 and how that affects what's happening today. You know, so if you know through history, so remember, in knowing history, it determines of, you know, of our past, and you get to see that we're actually, because the constellation are going to what they call the conjunction, the synoptics, they call it, every 20 years. So we're in 2020. We're marking a new conjunction, what they call the Jupiter Saturn, the Great Transformation, that has going to have an effect on what's happening globally, politically, economically, aspects of our lives and to humanity. So if you go back 20 years, 2000 marked the year, and you go back and back. So we're dealing with the 1920s. And so it's also known as the Roaring 20. And that's one of the only decade in American history that has a nickname like that, the Roaring 20. Um, and so, and it wasn't all about jazz bands and all, flappers and all that. Every aspect of life today was in some way influenced by the 1920s. What did you have in the 1920s that mimicked what's happening now? You had a pandemic, what they call the Spanish flu, right? Or SARS. It attacked the immune system and the respiratory system, right? And that was back in the 1919 and 1920s. And you see people were wearing a mask in certain events and stuff like that. The same thing is mimicking today. The same. And not only did we have a pandemic, okay, but here's the things that happened in the 1920s that affect us today. You see it playing out. It's like we're caught up in this little time warp. You know what I'm saying? And it happens every 20 years. One of the first things you can say about the 1920 was that the League of Nations was established. You know anything about the League of Nations became the United Nations, was established. In an address to Congress in the 1919, President Woodrow Wilson presented what he called the 14 points, derived by others as his 10 commandments, because Wilson, insufferable self-righteousness, a plan to end wars forever. The following year, he traveled to Paris. He negotiated with what they called the Treaty of Versailles. Upon his arrival, Byrne related, he was hailed by the French as no American since Benjamin Franklin has been hailed. He became the 14 points were enthusiastically adopted by diplomats, and it became the framework for the League of Nations, which is today the United Nations. And that's on January 16th of 1920. The League held its first executive council meeting, consisting of the major member powers. In November of that year, it held its first General Assembly in Geneva, which was open to all members, and its height in the League of Nations had 58 member states. The United States never joined at that time. But you see that, look at today with the United Nations. So what you have the World Health Organization, with Trump pulled out. You have the World Economic Forum, which is all the initiatives that are rolled out, globalization. You know what I'm saying? So the United Nations, which was the League of Nations in 1920, has an effect. Like today has an effect. And a lot of presidents prior to that were hinting about the New World Order. The New World Order is a globalization of the world. It is an initiative of the United Nations. You know what I'm saying? So you can see how in the 1920 and today it affects us today with the United Nations, and you see the amount of influence that the United Nations has on our lives, on humanity, on here on Earth, globally, especially here in the United States and wherever you at right now. Another thing about the 1920s, very interesting, and this is a prediction that could happen, is that American is that America had a de facto woman president. But notice, a de facto woman president. And de facto, we have to, we'll define that after I finish with this first. While on a campaign trail pushing the U.S. to accept the League of Nations, President Wilson suffered a blood clot that caused a paralysis, partial blindness, and brain damage. For the remainder of his term, another year and a half, was, as Burns described, an invalid at best, little more than a rumor at worst. Totally incapable of meeting with lawmakers, governing, and performing the duties of the presidency, the First Lady, Edith Wilson, stepped in. She stepped in and assumed the role. She controlled access to the president and made policy decisions on his behalf. When something needed to be signed or written, she wrapped her hand around his and swore words with his pen. The French ambassador to the United States reported back to his supporter that Wilson was a non-factor in government. The real power rests with Madam President. So, how does this affect us today? Which is interesting. It was very interesting to know that Biden picked a vice president, a woman, a melanated woman, Kamala Harris, as his vice president, run for vice presidency. Now, let's say Biden wins. He's winning now. He's ahead of the poll. Let's say Biden wins and Kamala Harris becomes vice president. But now, let's say something happens to Biden's health and he's unable to continue his government, his meetings. Guess who takes over? Kamala Harris, a woman. So this could be a possibility that in Biden's year that he's in the presidency, something can happen that she might have to fill in those shoes and become not the first president, because remember, de facto president, but she'll become the first vice president to move up to presidency and take over the functions of the United States and one of the first women. I find that kind of interesting. You know what I'm saying? I'm just correlating what happened then, and we're going to morph it all together and see how the constellation, and you can see that's happening. Okay. The third thing that happened in the 1920s, besides the pandemic, besides the de facto president woman, and besides the enactment of the League of Nations, which became United Nations, was that America sustained the worst terrorist attack in its history. Now we know that in the year 2000, it happened with or 2001, in this decade, it happened with the World Trade Center. And then prior to that was the Oklahoma terrorists, and then the bombing. But I'm predicting that there might be another attack in 1921. In these next decades to come, because remember, it's like the first 10 years, 20 years, 2020, 2030. In between 2020 and 2030, a very hideous, another terrorist attack. But this has been building up. So on September the 16th of 1920, a horse-drawn car carrying a massive improvised explosive was detonated on the busiest corner on Wall Street. And I think that there might be a terrorist attack on Wall Street. One eyewitness described two sheets of flame that seemed to envelop the whole width of the Wall Street and higher on the 10th story of tall buildings. 38 people were killed in the Wall Street bombing. Hundreds were injured. It was, at the time, the worst terrorist attack in American history. Unsurpassed in horror until the Oklahoma City bombing in 1995. The perpetrators were likely Italian anarchists. So in the 1920s, it's going on. And so we're looking at this decade. It's an attack that might happen, a good chance of it happening in the year 2021. Could be even before the 21 rolls in, or it could be after, marking in that year. So we have to be very, very careful. Right now, with this election going on, it's beginning to get a little heated up. And we're going to go over that and speak on to other points here. Another thing that happened in 1920 that J. Edgar Hoover began his ascent. So I'm looking at a agency, a head of an agency person's going to start this ascent. Is a new version of what they call the FBI and CIA. Well, CIA moved out to Switzerland. You know what I'm saying? They operate out of Switzerland. But we're talking about a agency which is clandestinely right now operating, but that's going to probably come up to the forefront. As a result of series of bombings in the 1919, you know what I'm saying? And you know, a series of bombing and the protesting and all that stuff like it's happening now. The Attorney General of the United States, Michelle Palmer, mounted a campaign to capture and deport foreign radicals. The next year marked the most spectacular of the Palmer raid, in which thousands of accused communists and anarchists across the country were arrested in single swat. It's like today, Black Lives Matter or the Antifa, right? The raid's organizer was a young lawyer named J. Edgar Hoover, head of the Bureau of Investigation of General Intelligence Division. Ultimately, the raid proved to be fraught with questionable confessions and illegal warrants. The Palmer career was derailed as a result. Hoover, however, will go on to lead the Bureau and a successor agency, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, from 1924 to 1972. So look at a person, look at a dignitary, a person that's going to be ahead of a new bureau that's going to come, that's going to operate in that form. You know what I'm saying? So the raids were a formative lesson for Hoover. After witnessing what happened to Palmer, Hoover will work obsessively to keep in the good graces of the political powers. The FBI never investigated a member of Congress while Hoover was in charge. The work always to protect the FBI's image. Okay. Here's another one. Women gained the right to vote in the 1920s. The women's suffrage movement reached as far back as 1638, when Margaret Brent, a successful businesswoman in Virginia, demanded the right to vote in the state of House of Burgesses. By 1920, every state west of the Mississippi River allowed women to vote. Byrne notes that a mere 9 states denied women the vote in all instances, and 7 of those, to their implacable shame, were among the original 13 colonies. The last, yes, vote needed by ratification of the 19th Amendment, which provided the women's suffrage, was Tennessee. On August 18, 1920, Tennessee House of Representatives voted in favor of the amendment by the vote of 50 to 49. women gained the right to vote in the 1920s. What's happening today? There's discussions now of who. Right now, you know who don't have the rights to vote? Immigrants coming in, either the illegal or legal. Immigrants coming in doesn't have the right to vote. So they're trying to change that because remember, and also convicts doesn't have the right to vote either. When you're in prison, all of that, all of those privileges are eradicated. So what's happening now is there's discussions to have for one, ex-convicts to get their voting privileges back or to vote from jail, and also immigrants. Because remember, immigrants pay taxes. They enter into stores. They're consumers. They have to work. Even if they're getting money under the table, they still have to pay taxes when they enter to the store. They still have to pay taxes in any commodity that they try to consumerism they try to engage in. Have to pay for taxes. So right now there's discussions about that. You know, so I'm predicting that that's something else that's gonna in this next coming decade. It's going to be changed, and new laws are going to come to change all that. Because you see, what they're trying to do is they're trying to revamp their system as to reset it. But the way they reset it is by revamping this old system, which is done. And we'll go over that. It's their last um, their last opportunity for them to fix a broken system or failed system. Another one that happened in 1920 was that the Constitution was twice amended in a single year. That's happening now. That is happening now. And I don't want to go too political, so I don't want to mention a lot of these amendments that are being ratified right now. But it was the only year since the passage of the Bill of Rights that the Constitution was twice amended. The 18th Amendment prohibited alcohol in the United States, and it was Rightsburn the most importantly ignored regulation in American history. Not only the amendment failed to be heeded, it also failed to be acknowledged with a straight face. As Will Rogers asked at the time, why don't they pass a constitutional amendment prohibiting anybody from learning anything? If it works as well as its prohibition did, in 5 years, Americans will be the smartest race on the planet of the earth. In the 1920, Burns provides an astonishing array of statistics that were the result of the prohibition. Drunk and disorderly arrests increased by 41%. Drunk driving increased by 81%. Violent crime and murder went up 13%. The federal prison population swelled by the staggering 366%. And the federal expenditures of penal institutions of all sorts soared 1,000%. What's happening now? You see, and that's why they brought in Kamala Harris, because she was the one behind a lot of young men, especially black men or young men, young Americans being jailed because of the use of marijuana. So this is to say back the prohibition. Today, you have certain states that do allow the use of the cannabis and the marijuana. Some for medical use and some for recreational use. But not all not all the states right now. And also you can, even with liquor today, you can't bring liquor from another state to another state because it has a seal on it. You know what I'm saying? So it's protected by a state code. So the same thing is gonna happen with the use of cannabis. You know what I'm saying? Prohibition is that they can reverse everything, and right now it's illegal in the federal government. Only in different states allowed it. But once they ratify that and legalize it in all of the states, that means federally, There's a mandate federally. Is an amendment which will allow it. But right now, there's not. They're trying to put that on board. Okay, so what it did, it created like prohibition did in the 1920s before it was repealed back. It created a lot of underground empires, a lot of underground empires, and that's what's happening also with the cannabis. You know what I'm saying? Now there are some individuals that are becoming very, very wealthy off of it right now. You know what I'm saying? But they are becoming wealthy only in their area, in their section, but that they cannot expand it worldwide or they cannot expand it nationally. You know what I'm saying? Because there's borders. You know what I'm saying? It's not federally mandated. So this is how in the 1920s where it was a liquor, and this is how today that seems to mimic a lot of what's happening. Um, Another one is that the lost generation, okay, Generation X. So there's a generation out here began its transformation of American literature. So what's happening now? So in the 1920, the lost generation aspirated writers who lived in Europe following World War One became forced in American literature. Among books published in the 1920s were Main Street, a scouring of small town America by Sinclair Lewis, This Side of Paradise, the debut novel Federal of Scott Fitzgerald, Scott Fitzgerald, and Flappers and Philosophers, Fitzgerald's first collection of short fiction. That year, Fitzgerald also introduced Maxwell Perkins, the famed editor for Scribner's, to the short story of Ernest, the editor for Scribner's to the short story of Ernest Hemingway, who would go on to some success. That goes to say, in literature, there's a lot of a generation that is beginning to publish books. And now with the technology now, you could publish books, but there's a whole generation of trying to bring out this information and also publish it. It morphed into publishing in music too. There is a new norm when it comes to publishing, and a lot of artists, literature and music artists, has published their works and have impact a new culture within the United States, within the Americas. For one, is hip hop. A lot of publishing in hip hop has changed, morphed this culture that it even became worldwide, but it was started here in America. So you see this generation pushing forward. So you're going to see in the 2020s and on, you're going to see a new generation publishing. I said trying to stop the YouTube blogs, and you're going to see them publishing a new content of ideology of how they want to view the dream of the world going forward. And that happened in the 1920s, so it's happening in the 2020s. In other words, the KKK terrorized the nation. Now, the Ku Klux Klan, a genocidal domestic terrorist organization founded during the Reconstruction, was revitalized in the 1920s. The result in part of a new Klan leadership with the eye on publicity. The Klan's activity Burns described were reigns of terror, spatially widely in time and space, time and place, and could be loosely compared to the later day breakouts of the Inquisition. But while the Inquisition targeted heretical Roman Catholics, The Klan hated not only Catholics, but Jews, Asian, African American, Europeans who were not from the non Nordic countries of the North. 50 years later, President Johnson turned J. Edgar Hoover loose on the KKK, and the FBI would achieve the greatest law enforcement victory in history, all but eradicating the terrorist organization. So, how did that morph into what's happening today? Well, look at the equivalency of what you call the white militia, or what they call the Hunters Club. The white militia, which is the biggest military um, company or combination in the world. But what is white militia? Very powerful. Um, and now it's not about hating. It's not about hating just Jews, blacks, whatever. It's about hating the leftists, the socialists, the so-called socialists, or the leftists, or the Democrats. You know what I'm saying? So there's a new front. There's a new agenda that morphed from the 1920s, started in now in the 2020s. You're going to see this, and it's happening. And this what might lead into this civil war that's going on between the left and the right. You know, so we see this happening all over again. You know, in the 1920s, the mass media was born, and we'll see how today what we call social media is going to be burst out. So in November of 1920, the first commercially licensed radio station began broadcasting live results of the presidential election. The transmission of breaking news was new and unprecedented, and as word spread of this new medium, the talking box exploded in popularity. 2 years later, Americans bought 100,000 radios. In 1923, they bought 500,000. By 1926, they were all over 700 commercial radio stations. And virtually the entire country was covered by radio signals. And Byrne writes, no other event of 1920 would have more of an effect on the future than the birth of radio, which was in turn the birth of America mass media. And today, you have social media. The birth of social media is becoming huge with the TikTok and YouTube and Twitter. So you see a huge explosion of that, just like it happened in 1920. It's happening in the 2020s. You're going to see this huge explosion. You know what I'm saying? And it's been leading up to that. You know. So those are just a few of the things that happened in 1920 and how they mimic. And now this leads me to speak about in the 2020 what they call societal reset. Okay, let me just bring up my notes. The 2020 societal reset, or what they call the Great Transformation. Now, the Great Transformation is from 2020 all the way to 2030. That's 10 years. In 2020 marks the societal reset. Not only the societal reset, well, it includes everything. It includes politically, includes economically, which is the global currency reset. It includes all of that. Now, in the year 2020, there are 3 planetary cycles complete and begin anew, creating a societal reset and the start of the Great Transformation occurring throughout the new decade, which is the 2020 to the 2030. So you see 3 of these planetary cycles. One of them is Saturn and Pluto. And that occurred in January 10 of the 2020, initially a new 34-year cycle. Now, this is what they call a synop. Now, I don't want to go too deep into this because then I don't want to bore you with all this talk, but you can read a lot of this stuff in lunarplanner.com. I just want to mention, so these societal resets delineates our entries into the new decade, which is called the Great Transformation. Some of the above may sound intense and create challenges for humanity to face, but keep in mind that they are amid our old world paradigm's deconstruction, and this makes room for and provide the impetus for a new world paradigms to emerge. So let's look at the Jupiter and Saturn 20-year synoptic cycle, which began in the year 2000. So Jupiter and Saturn makes their climatic arrival to conjoin with Pluto in late sidereal Sagittarius and under the aspects of Aquila the eagle in 2020. Um, just wanted to get out of here. It's not what I wanted to go into because this is a lot of technical stuff. This is dealing with astronomy. And so there's a lot of stuff we can cover, but I don't want to do that. Um, see, um, so the reason I'm going over this real quickly is because these are the constellation and the effect that it has on society, on humanity, and like I said, billionaires who run governments do not make a move and are constantly in contact and constantly observing through their means of like NASA and their universities. They have access to all that technology, which view the constellation because they know the connection of that constellation has to that sun and that sun has to humanity, you know. So they are very, very in tune. And so we as humanity, when we clear all this blockage that we have, we could tune in into this character personality archetypes, symbols that affect us and our bodies and humanity. And it's very, very, very interesting that I've been getting into this. Like I said, when we were clearing out those blockage and I started analyzing these blockage and dealing with the energy center, and I got to the crown, and then when that petal opened up, and then I started to view things very, very differently. Started to see how the constellation started to get into my archetype and started to get into a lot of what's going on here. Started to get into how nature are being influenced by the constellations and how we're all around us, we're engulfed in that. I mean, if you ever, I don't know if you ever looked at, or you're traveling the plane and at night you look at the city and you see they look like constellations. You know what I'm saying? The way everything is spread out, and it's just crazy when I started thinking about it. What's going on here? My page crashed. Eh, interesting. Let's see if it comes up. If it crashes, because I got to look at my settings. Sometimes my iPad ping pongs from 5G to 2G. I don't know what's going on with that. You know, you're wondering why do these things happen? Now my iPad is acting up. There's something. Well, I'm at 2G, which I don't know why. Let's just look at my 2G. Make sure everything is it's here. Yep. I have my router, my DNS, my subnet map, everything is operative. But why am I not getting? Why is it so slow? A lot of times, especially at this time right now, it's 6:30. A lot of people come from work and they get on their computers or their phones. You know what I'm saying? So they bombard the system. 5G is rolling out, but it's not yet out there. Well, let me see if I can grab some notes here. Uh, Man, come on. I mean, I can always freestyle. We can go into some other things. I mean, but you know, the main point is this: is that the constellations, when you have these planets orbiting, okay, they're on an electromagnet. They're on a grid, like called electromagnetic grid, that in relationship with the sun, and it's a grid. So they follow a specific trajectory. They follow a specific orbit, and that all can have an effect. That all can have an effect on, the pull on Earth, and electromagnetically, that pull magnetically affect our connection to the source, to our sun. So all of that is related. It's connected, So when you have Jupiter and Saturn being the biggest planet, two of the biggest planet orbiting the sun is Jupiter and Saturn. They're humongous, especially Jupiter. And when they are pulling at each other, having this communication, flirting with each other, that also affects the pull of the sun. So the sun has a corona around it. And when that happens, it pulls on that. And so you get this corona flashes or spurs or sun heat. And that's what they call, they're looking at global warming. And also the corona rising. You know what I'm saying? This corona is starting to now spread out and affecting the earth, and it's a disruptor to what they call the systems that has been planted, the systems that has been mapped out by a lot of these old families, a billionaires, a certain type of people, and it disrupted that. So it became a virus to them. And I'm not saying that there's not also a biological virus, but like I said, a lot of these people mimic a lot of the constellations. So, it's all in humanity's thinking, what I'm saying? And the effect that is having on the mental also of humanity, of certain people. Now, as we turn the corner to this new decade, 2020 marks a new decade, the cosmos are changing also as quickly as we are. Actually, it's determining the change. So the year 2020 kicks off a decade of an astrological cycle known as Jupiter, Saturn, and Pluto transformation, or what they call the Great Transformation, because those are some of the biggest planets. And intuitive, you know, it could signal a tectonic shift in political, financial, and personal realms. So when we up on this and we get to see how these changes happen and what should in our life should we be concentrating on, you know, it gives us an awareness what to look out for and also how to map out our future. So we got 10 years to map out how we are going to live the next couple of decades, or our children are going to live the next decade. So, in the upcoming year will be extra special for all of us because of the three, what they call synaptic cycles. And synaptic cycle is a time when two planets are in conjunction with one another. So you're going to have three of these cycles. When the outer planet aspects one another, they represent a bigger shift in our consciousness because the outer planets move more slowly and their aspect relationship lasts longer than the inner planets like Mercury, Venus, and Mars. The outer planet relationship symbolizes changes we see manifest in our personal life and in the world. Let's go over December the 21st. Now, this is very important. I've been here for almost an hour. Man, I wasn't going to do this long, but this is just one of those podcasts. I'm going to keep it like that. So, December the 21st, Jupiter and Saturn meets in Aquarius. It's what you call the marking of the age of Aquarius, what they were always preparing us for. The transits show us where we're going next after the reconstruction and the expansion we encountered through 2020 Saturn and Pluto conjunction and Juno and Pluto conjunction. We went through a reconstruction and expansion. The Great Conjunction offers us a way forward, a concrete path that we need to be aware of. That means we'll begin to map our way forward in businesses, religion, finances, and government for the remaining 9 years of the decade. So this transit suggests a new beginning for all of us and a turning point in our history. You got the fourth industrial revolution coming in. You got the collapse of the dollar and the beginning of what? Cryptocurrency. That's the future. Cryptocurrency is the future. Blockchain technology, hash graph technology. This is the future. This is where we need to be directing ourselves to. You know, we got 9 years to play around with this money, the dollar bill, but it's collapsing, declining as we speak, and constantly declining because they're going to make that shift. Just like they took the gold before in 1920 and 1933, they took the gold out of the market, out of the standard, and put what? Fiat money, and put in a new note, promissory notes. So now in this 2020, is they're going to take those promissory notes out and create this cryptocurrency, digital money. So we should be looking of how we're going to map out our businesses and also our religion. People are no longer being investing in this dogma and doctrine. They're waking up. They are waking up to the lies and the blockage, the illusions and the fractal ideology, the fractal principles. People are waking up every day. So this great transformation shows the best way forward, and is to bring our unique and individual ideas together in community spaces. Start working with your communities. Start looking into these new technologies or this shift, paradigm shift. There's going to be building teams and coalitions to create change. So there's changes happening in religion. There's changes happening in government. There's changes happening in finances and businesses. A change is coming. So we got to think about this. It's a liberating influence that starts with you questioning your beliefs and thought patterns, says the astronomer. So what it was saying here is that this is great transformation, this reset, societal reset, and under that is politically reset, the reset of government, the reset. It's gonna get ugly before because there's certain people that still want to maintain this old system. They infested, they created dogma, and doctrine into this old system so they can't see themselves forwarding and seeing this change. We have to move forward. We have to now look at the future in all aspects of industries and what we involve. If you're into music, you got to look into the future of music. It's being disrupted now. They're gonna give you back another glimpse. People are gonna get out there. Oh yeah, you get back into clubs or whatever. But I don't know. They might want to flip the script and shut everything back down again. Listen, your president just had caught it or lived that narrative, propagated that narrative. Now they're saying that some of the military personnel also contracted coronavirus. So now more when you look, they're amping up the numbers wherever. They say they're getting ready to lock down New York all over again. And after I was watching, one of my favorite podcasts is watching Action Kid when he walks around New York and he's filming and he's talking about just I'm familiar with a lot of these areas and I see the changes, beautiful changes. And New York was booming, man. The restaurants were back. Restaurant Row in Brooklyn, Restaurant Row in Manhattan. All these places were booming. Fifth Avenue. Everything was starting back again. Now imagine after all of that, and people still wear masks, but after all of that, they're still saying the numbers are starting a drop. Now there's a spike. So it went down and now back up. North Carolina, same thing. So if they shut everything down again, you know the unfavorable condition that's going to create for a lot of people. So it's a system that's broken. If you have to shut it down because it's a system that's broken, there's a disruptor out there. There's something's going on, and they call that the coronavirus, right? It's disrupted, dismantling a system that is already failed. So they're trying to find a way to revamp this system. But it's like this. Those are not up on this constellation and knowing that there's a reset and billionaires know this, the World Economic Forum, everyone is saying, scientists, it's a new era coming in. It happened to us in the 1920s. It's happening again because the constellation is shifting and it's showing it's affecting society. You can't go against that because it's the influence of electromagnetic energy coming from the multiverse that's shifting the way we electrify our body, the way we in society, the way we enact with one another, the way communities comes together, the way government operates. All of this needs energy, currency to make it work. And if that currency is being blocked, one, by a lot of personal issues, and then Another by a lot of outside forces, issues, propaganda. You know, one of the biggest disruptor in the star energy center to stop you from connecting to your source is dogma and doctrine. And I've seen some of these podcasts. Like for instance, I was watching Sarnetta, and I've seen some of these podcasts, and man, let me tell you something. It's a shame that people still are thinking in this frame of dogmatic, religious dogmatic thinking, critical thinking, political dogma. They're still involved and it's disrupting their connection to the source. So they can't be conscious of eating right. They can't energize. Remember, the awareness is where you put your energy. Wherever you put your awareness, that energy flows to that. So if your awareness, if your energy is blocked by this dogma and these doctrine, then your mind, you can't connect with the universal mind. You can't connect with the constellations. You can't connect. You're out of sync with the flow of natural nature. So you're being eluded by these illusions, these dogma, these doctrine, these lies, and making you delusional. Very delusional. And listen, I stand on this. Anyone could come into my podcast and question me. Anyone. Once I learn, well, I'm trying to learn how to bring people. Okay, I can invite guests. Okay, I see that. But I don't know. I'm trying to see where can I bring people in. But maybe I can, whenever. Listen, on the description is my email. You email me and tell me what time and what day, and we could do a Zoom thing, and we can broadcast it, and you can see. I stand on these truth because I want at a certain time when you out here and you propagating the truth, you have to stand on it. You got to practice it, and you're going to be tested on it. And I don't mind being tested on anything. I don't know it all because I'm learning. I'm learning. And as I'm learning, I'm researching and learning, and then I'm heavily thinking and not only using critical, I'm not using critical thinking. I'm not saying is this or that. What I'm saying, I'm paradoxical thinking, and like I'm saying, hey, listen, it's this can exist and that can exist at the same time. It's just which one is more beneficial for you. Not only beneficial, which one is the truth. It's putting the pieces, fitting the pieces perfectly together. I'm willing to do that with anybody. Anybody. We'll talk about music. You know, I so much more I could accomplish in music. And so much, but wait a minute. Remember, ego blockage. There's so much to do in music. And I know that. In my musical life, there's so much more to do. That stuff that I've done in the past, I let it alone. Yeah, I recorded the first hip hop record and he said, oh, that's it. Let it, I leave it alone. But there's things to do now in terms of spiritual teachings. You know what I'm saying? I've learned from certain masters and certain sages and gurus. I've picked up certain things, right? But there's so much more to go. I don't get stuck with one master. I don't get stuck with just one, because there's many masters. And then that's when you master yourself and learn. It's always create that beginner's mindset, man. You know, I can still speak to my brothers from the Sufi, from the Ansar Allah, from the Wapians, Moorish. I could speak to a Israelite, you know what I'm saying? When they are open minded, only when they're open minded and we can have a dialogue back and forth. And it's not an attack on your ideology and not an attack on your master that you follow, not attack on all that. It's is living and harnessing the power to give awareness to what your master's been saying. You got that? You follow Buddha, and the things that he said about consciousness and the things that he taught. You could take some of that and your awareness is put light on some of those principles and harness that power within yourself. I don't care what master you claim to have. Yanin, Payanun, or whatever masters out there. It's taking, is acknowledging, being aware of that energy that they were able to impart in their life to help beneficial power your life at the same time is an example. How can a person know what's right if you don't make them aware of what's wrong? So, you know, it's getting dark in here. So the constellation plays a very, very, very important part in any society, in any teachings. When you go, if you even go back to the Sumerian teachings, they have, I think the Illuminalish, one of those, or the epic, not the epic, I think the Illuminalish speaks about these beings as planetary, as planets, and the relationship these planets had. They tell a story. And when this Sunday, when we go back to church, Sunday, we go back into the community temple. That's what I'm gonna call it, the temple, inner temple. Um, we're gonna speak about how when you could see a spirituality in some of these biblical narratives, but you have to put it back in. You got to be open minded, and you got to see how all of that relates to natural nature. You know what I'm saying? Because in order, no one can create nothing. No one can take nothing from natural nature. Because where did they get it from? From natural nature. Natural nature is what it is all around us. What they call the all. The all in all is natural nature. And you have a natural human existence. You know what I'm saying? And we forget that. We're not conscious of that because we get caught up in the news and political dogma. We get caught up in the lies. We get caught up in grieving about losses, deep sorrow. We get caught up in guilt. We get caught up in fear. You know what I'm saying? We get caught up in illusions and of course the dogma. We get caught up in ignorance. You know, there's a quote. I'll get it. That we want to go into real quickly into biblical narrative. It's interesting. and it's about who is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. Did you hear that one? But this is what's interesting. And when I do this, it's not that I'm giving. I don't want to give life to a book that has. You just have to know how to use certain information in certain books. Let me see if I can find it here. Um, I can't find it. I don't know. Um, hmm, I'm sorry. Uh, well, it was about the greatest. You have to become like a child. Oh, let's look at that again. And what I noticed about how free babies are is that they don't have those blockages. Because they're just little babies, so they don't have the grief. They don't have all of that, and they're so free to experience life. And I find that very, 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 you know, you see that in children, and that's why I love, you see that innocence, you see that, yeah, no grief, no nothing, because they haven't lived that. It's just when you start, and that's important to keep a child like that. And so as you age, you have to get in that mindset in order to free and connect, become a child at heart. I wish I could find it because I like to give biblical references. You know what I'm saying? I like to give biblical references, but I know it's in the New Testament. Uh, this is whew. When it comes to the word child in the Bible, man, it's all over the place, all over, all over, all over. Oh, here it goes. It's Matthew 18. For whoever themselves shall humble himself as this little child, the same is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. So in this kingdom of etheric, heaven is ether, the etheric realm, the realm of energy. And whoever humbles themselves like a child will be the greatest, you know. And I look at, newborn babies, I look at such an innocence, such a, what I'm saying, they don't have no blockages. So you got to look at your life and you have to become that child again. Get rid of those blockages. Learn how to deal with that. You know what I'm saying? And have this mindset. You know what I'm saying? And then you see how it will elevate you and will feed you and elevate you. You know. Anyway, let me end it here. And man, I mean, this was a long one for 1 hour. But I read. It's all about Let's get connecting to the source, and then that source is connected to the constellation and how that affect us. And if you see how in the 1920s, how they're mimicking in the 2020 in this new decade. So start mapping out. You got 9 years. 9 years. I'm gonna take advantage of those 9 years. Start mapping out my business, my finances, my family. And start mapping out. You know what I'm saying? I mean, there's some people that already have done that and they're ahead of the curve. Ahead of the pack. The special peoples, and I know, but you know what I'm saying? I'm a cautious late bloomer. So, but all those that are with me, man, like, we can do this. You know what I'm saying? And like I said, email me if you want to do a Zoom. You want to come in, I can invite you to come in. You know what I'm saying? And just come on in and we can have this discussion. I don't know. You have to pick the time. And like I said, I stand on my truth. I stand on that puzzle fit perfectly together because it fits in for me and it fits in with humanity. You know what I'm saying? And I don't know it all. There's so much to know. You know, like I say, you think you know it all? Walk through a freaking library. Ground yourself. Walk it through a library and look at all those books and see how much you really know. Or go to Barnes and Noble or one of those stores. Even with the internet, oh my. Look up information on. There's so much information on the internet. You know what I'm saying? Or stand in front, go to the beach, ground yourself in the sand, put your toes in the sand, and especially at night, and look out to that ocean. That'll humble you. Or go to a cliff and see the ocean hitting on those cliffs. That'll humble you. You know what I'm saying? Anyway, peace and blessings. Dahanihi bui. That means I love you. Dahanihi bui. You know. So peace.